Now, as we know, the Union is a global leader in the fight against TB and solving key problems in treating major lung diseases. It's a massive role that spans the world, widely sharing research-based evidence to deliver life-saving health services to the people who need it most. All this while at the same time safeguarding health and advocating for policy and resource changes. And to learn more about this and get a view from the top, yesterday I spoke to Prof Guy Marks, President of the Union and Interim Executive Director. We're a year into the Union's 2022-2027 vision and strategy for TB, so I started by asking Professor Marks to explain the main challenges that still lie ahead.
That's a very good and difficult question to answer, but many ways our mission, as you said, is to our vision is to end TB as a problem and other lung disease problems, and we want to try and reduce suffering due to tuberculosis and lung disease in all peoples, leaving no one behind. And we use a number of strategies about that. We're about science and research and evidence, about promoting that science, about disseminating that science, and about seeing it implemented into policy and into practice. And in fact, that's a big theme for this conference, is about seeing evidence moved into policy and practice. And sometimes, and we also are about providing technical support for countries who need that technical support, building capacity in healthcare work, in the health workforce, and in training and education and so on. And so that's an ongoing task for us. The conference is a very big part of where we are now, is a very big part of that. The journal is a very big part of that, and we've spent a lot of time in the last few years trying to reinvigorate the conference. Of course, we had the problem with COVID, like everybody, and this is the first time back in an in-person conference since 2019. We're reinvigorating and revitalising our journal offering. We're renewing our scientific strategy. We're renewing our business strategy, if you like. So we're doing quite a lot of things to reinvigorate the organisation.
It does sound like you've got quite a lot on your plate there. And you've just mentioned also we're back in Paris for the first time because the conference was virtual for the obvious reasons. So you mentioned about reinvigorated. How does it feel actually to be back in person? And what's the reaction so far been? I mean, there's been a lot of people on the floor today.
There are a lot of people. I mentioned at one of the sessions today, you know, a few months ago or a year ago when we started planning this, he said, yes, we'll put on a conference, but will anybody come? And so it's always a very nervous time for an organisation. You know, you book the venue, you book the speakers, you do all of this preparation, and will anybody actually come? Well, the answer is they will come, and they did come, and more people than we expected, to be honest. It's very crowded, but it's wonderful. It's a fantastic vibe. Everybody's seeing people they haven't seen for years, and they've got full of ideas and enthusiasm, and there's a tremendous energy that I'm feeling on the floor, and I'm really excited about it. And we have the other thing that's wonderful about the Union Conference is it's so diverse. It's more diverse than any. You know, I go to scientific conferences. This is diverse in many respects. It's diverse because people come from all corners of the globe, from rich and poor countries, but it's diverse in the sense that it includes people who are scientists, people who are researchers, people who are clinicians, people who are managers, people who have suffered from TB or lung disease and are patients or affected communities. It's just this diverse population of people who have a stake in this problem of reducing the burden of TB and lung disease.
Yeah.
And it's a unique experience. It's something that's unique about the Union.
Yeah, it's my first time here. I definitely get that sense of uniqueness, and you could see the joy of people being back together again. But I think you're right in that diversity of thought and expertise. It is amazing, isn't it? Now, I know you chaired the first plenary earlier this afternoon entitled Closing the Gap Between Evidence and Implementation. How close are we to that? And what, in your view, are the biggest hurdles for those health professionals? What do they face?
Look, I think that we had some good presentations about that at this plenary today, and undoubtedly there are financial constraints, costs. That some of the things that we want to be able to roll out, we just don't have sufficient resources to do, and that is, the advocacy community are very engaged in that, and I draw the analogy between tuberculosis and HIV. Tuberculosis is, because it's an old disease, people tend to take it for granted, and they say, well, we can only do certain things in poor countries. We can't do what needs to be done because they have not much money. But when we had, in the late 1990s and around the turn of the millennium, when antiretroviral therapy became available for HIV, clearly there were many world leaders who said we can't say that for this. We can't say you can only get antiretroviral therapy if you live in Europe or America. Most people are living in sub-Saharan Africa who have HIV, and they have to get this drug. And so it was funded, PEPFAR and global funds. But the things that need to be done, there is global fund funding for TB, but it is not doing necessarily the things that need to be done to get rid of TB in low and middle income countries. So I think it's funding that is the fundamental thing. There are institutional hurdles. There is, the slowness sometimes of organisations to adapt. But underlying it all is, do we have the resource to do this?
Yeah, and actually you mentioned about the global picture in a sense. And let's think about the recent UN high-level meeting on TB in September, where global leaders reaffirmed their commitments to ending TB by 2030. We're currently not on track to achieve this. What needs to change, do you think, to actually achieve it?
Well, that's a very good question, and I do have some thoughts about that. I think myself and my colleagues, both in the Union and elsewhere, are sort of recognising that the current paradigm that we're using to end TB is not working. As you say, we're not on track. And we've sort of lost sight of what we know about the epidemiology. I'm an epidemiologist and a clinician, and a pulmonary clinician, and I believe very strongly that we need to use an epidemiological approach to understanding what TB is, how it transmits. The fundamental problem is that in low burden settings like Australia or the US or Europe, we all know that TB is an infectious disease, and we go to a lot of effort to stop getting infected with it. In high burden settings, it's so ubiquitous that people don't even think that it's an infectious disease. They've forgotten that actually you get TB by being infected by somebody else who has TB. That's because infection is everywhere and all the time, and we need to stop that. That's what happened, in fact, in Australia and in Europe and in the United Kingdom. In the post-war years, we did mass screening. We found all the people who had TB, and we treated them, made them no longer infectious, and that stopped TB. It plummeted and it went away. And we need to do that in the rest of the world, ultimately. And we can't just say that it's too expensive. That's not the answer. That's the answer I always get, but it's actually, A, it's not as expensive as people think, and B, that is not a reason, to say, why should we condemn the rest of the world that they have to live forever with TB? If we keep doing what we're doing now, we'll be still talking about this in 100 years' time. I don't want to have a conference, I won't be here, but I don't want to have a conference even in 20 years' time where we're still talking about the high burden of TB.
You never know. There are some amazing treatments out there to keep us alive for beyond 100 years. And talking about 100 years, the Union has been leading the way, hasn't it, with TB and lung health for 100 years, over 100 years. And we've seen tremendous change in the work the union, you've probably seen it firsthand, over the past decades with better education, faster improved communications, and really an impressive overview of research. So where do you see the union, if you can crystal gaze, in maybe 10 or 20 years' time?
Very good question. I mean, first of all, I want to say yes, we're over 100 years old. We were founded in 1920 in Paris, and that's part of the reason why we decided to come back to Paris for this first meeting, in-person meeting for 4 years. This is the country in which we were founded, and in fact where we're still registered as an organisation. But we are truly global. We have actually very few staff here in Paris, and we have most of our staff are in other countries in the world. But the answer to your question is that, as I sort of suggested before, I don't want us to be still doing tuberculosis in 100 years or even in 20 years. I think we can deal with tuberculosis. It's a problem that can be got rid of, as we've got rid of some other problems. But there are other lung health problems which we will still be dealing with. Asthma, COPD, pneumonia, pandemics like COVID, influenza, lung cancer, and air pollution, tobacco. Those problems, unfortunately, in 20 years' time will still be with us. They will excessively be affecting people in low and middle income countries. There will be people who are being left behind. And our mission is not to leave anyone behind. And that's where I think we will be going in 20 years' time, into other diseases other than just tuberculosis. In fact, in the 1980s and 90s, our predecessors in this organisation thought that that's where we would be now with TB, and they were preparing then to move into other fields. But we've unfortunately learnt that we're not there now. We still have a really big problem with TB, and we need to get this job done. That's my sort of vision.
Indeed, so then you can focus on the other areas, like you said. Obviously, yes. Asthma incredibly personal to me, as I mentioned in the opening ceremony, and having had pneumonia multiple times as well, double pneumonia, critically nearly losing my life. It's so important, and asthma rates seem to be much more prevalent as well and growing. And I think that connection between air pollution, I don't think people have made the connection enough now. So that's interesting you're focusing on that. But actually, turning back to the conference, it's a packed programme, isn't it? So I'm looking for recommendations from you over the next 3 days. We've still got a little bit of the first day left, but what are your top tips? What sessions, should we be looking out for? Well, you can recommend your own as well if you like.
Nadine, I'm probably not the right person to ask that question of. I'm not as across the program as I would like to be. I spend all my time doing this sort of thing and meeting other people. So I think there are great sessions on science. There are great new trials being presented. We have some late breaker sessions, I think, on Saturday or Friday or Saturday, in which we're presenting a number of important new trials. This is the place to be, particularly for the latest stuff on asthma. And if you want to know what's going on in any field, in TB, then this is the place to be. So I'm not going to give any hot tips. I think people need to look at the program and see what they're particularly interested in.
Yeah, there's something for everybody, isn't there, really, all around the world. But thank you so much. I know you've got a busy time ahead. Professor Guy Marks, President and Interim Executive Director of the Union, thank you so much for talking to us here on UnionLIVE.
Thank you very much.